are listening to In Pursuit of Development with Dan Banik.
I am so thrilled to have you on the show today, Mo. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So let me start with a very, I suppose, a simple question for you, because you keep talking about this in many forums. Africa, I've just actually returned from Kenya and Ethiopia. I've been away for a month, and I've been studying infrastructure, development, but also energy security. And we'll talk about this later, but I wanted to ask you a very general question, Mo. There's been so much talk about African development. A lot of major powers are now fighting for Africa's attention, the geopolitics of it all. Everybody seems to be talking about Africa, and yet hundreds of millions of people still struggle in terms of not having electricity. There is an abundance of natural resources, and yet there are lots of people living in poverty. So despite all of the natural resources, despite all this attention, what do you think explains this continued poverty in large parts of the continent?
How much time have you got?
A lot for you.
Yeah, because it is a long story. I mean, you are absolutely correct. It is a very rich continent, which really is underpopulated. And just to think, I mean, we have the same population like India, almost the same population like China.
Yeah.
And we are 3 times bigger than China, size-wise. And about 7-8 times maybe bigger than China, than India, size-wise.
Yes.
And we have all these resources, much more than what China have, much more than what India have. We have a wonderful location in the middle of all these continents around us with all these, and we cannot feed ourselves. I mean, we are poor. I mean, there's a number of reasons. Some of them self-inflicted,
Mm-hmm.
and some were inflicted by us on others. We had slavery, we had colonialism, and we had the Cold War. Each of these inflicted a lot of damage on us. And some of this damage, unfortunately, still play a role at the moment. One point, for example, independence, we ended up with 54 countries. How these countries was created? Haphazardly.
Yes.
I mean, it depends. The French took the West Africa, the German went to Namibia, and the Italian went to Ethiopia, then the British took all the rest, and then it is all the jostling between these powers and light and drunken colonels sitting at night in Fashoda or somewhere, drawing lines between countries without taking into consideration any geographic or natural borders or even people. This cut across communities, these lines. So we ended up with really fictitious borders, which doesn't serve anything. And we ended up in 44 countries. Look, the Empire of Mali, a few hundred years ago, was really, which one of the early empires in Africa with constitution, rights of citizens, etc., etc. It included some 7 countries of today's countries. What happened? Why this became 7 countries? We have countries within countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's something very unique in Africa. We have countries inside other countries, countries which landlocked, countries which is so tiny, frankly, make it completely unviable. And this something is a major problem. And on the immediate period after colonization, when they had the Organization of African Union at the time, they decided that it is not helpful, but if they try to change it now, this means will have been endless conflicts. And they took the right decision of, okay, we'll just have to respect these borders to avoid conflicts.
Yeah.
And but that has serious economic and social outcomes as far as we consider. I always ask our African friends, if China was 54 countries, each with its own financial systems, currency, flags, whatever, but would that be the superpower it have today? Size matters, and we have been decimated into too many bits and pieces around there, and each of one has its own system, its own customs, barriers, whatever. There's no freedom of movement of goods or people, or that is very sad. Of course, now they try to repair some of the damage by creating some form of common market, you know, the continental trade agreement.
Free trade agreement, yeah.
It's taking time and it's very slow. It has to move much faster. But size matter really. And tiny little states, you know, around it. So this is a legacy of colonialism, which is still affecting us today. And another legacy also is affecting us is that a colonial power will decide what is the economic outlook of that particular colony. So Britain said, well, I have some textile industries in Manchester and in Bradford. So Egypt, Sudan, and this guy, you do cotton. You just do cotton because I need that here. Then somebody, Ivory Coast, you do cocoa, okay, cocoa beans, because we need coffee here. So economies and agriculture was defined by the needs of others, not by the needs of people. And that also produced, I mean, at the moment, we cannot feed our people because of the agriculture sector need complete redesign in Africa because it doesn't meet our needs. It's low, so we have a lot of legacies from the past. Cold War was very bad for us because the powers that be, we had two competing camps, and those guys were not interested in good governance or whatever. They're interested in having clients. I need clients to vote for me in the United Nations, to allow me to have a military presence in the country, or to have monopoly of the raw material. And so you are a military dictator, you are a thief, you are a criminal, but that's not an issue. You'll be feted in Buckingham Palace or whatever because you are our client. We'll ask the World Bank to give you money because although we know you're going to steal the money, but it's fine.
Yeah.
So we have legacies from the past, unfortunately. And decolonization happened very quickly. And we did not, democracy is about institutions. None of these institutions were really managed to put roots in the African soil before colonization, because, I mean, you are not interested in free speech or democracy in a colony if you are a colonizer. Actually, you don't like it.
That's a good point.
So we don't do anything about that. And then independence come, let us create some fictional stuff here, have a nice colorful flag, and we have an anthem, and we get a friendly prime minister here. And so we have all the appearance of an independent state, but not the institutions who are underpinned that United States. So we had so many military dictatorship.
But Mo, just, I mean, on the role of colonialism, I see a shift that is happening. There are more and more people questioning the role of the British. For example, with the recent passing of the Queen, there has been an outpouring of not just support, but also anger for what the British government did to, say, Kenya. Or many parts of the world, right? So I see like there's more of a pushback, don't you think, against the British, even the French, now what's happening in Burkina Faso. I mean, you see that people are really questioning that more and more. But there are also others more who are saying we have new forms of colonial powers from China, etc. So you have this accusation that there's a scramble, a new scramble for Africa.
Yes, well, as we go, I mean, I went through the colonial era and the Cold War era and the independence. And I'm just trying to explain, why we lost so many years in Africa. Because we came out from the colonial era, divided, unrealistic borders, sub-scale countries. And then we're hit by the Cold War, which meant that was a big blow for governance and leadership, because these issues was not on the table. It's just in 2 decades, between 50 and 70s, we have like 88 military coups. Okay, it is just incredible. After the fall of Berlin Wall, first time people start to talk about governance and the first time the word corruption, or the C word as they call it, was uttered by somebody in the World Bank, by Wolfenson.
James Wolfenson, indeed.
Yes, and he said people were saying, no, you cannot mention the C word, Mr. President. That was in the 90s. So anyway, so things change. And the greatest improvement in African government started to take place at that time. And I'm just trying to explain why we did not manage really to move forward after decolonization. We lost half a century. Lost half a century with no development. Many of our rulers were just crooks, criminals, dictators, etc. And that creates another problem, is that not all of the rulers, of course, was some decent people. There are few decent people. But the problem, if you have some very bad people, those guys dominate the news. Everybody knows about Idi Amin. Everybody knows about Maputo. Everywhere in the world. That frightened investors. Africa acquired a reputation as a corrupt place. Decent business people don't go there. And the locusts, all the dodgy characters come to Africa. Okay, and we end up with this mess. We have, all these contracts for mining, for whatever, terrible, absolutely terrible. So this is and all these things related. We ended up in a very bad place. And now here we are. I think what really hinders our development at the moment, I'm talking about the other factors. Before I talk about self-inflicted, because we also inflicted things on ourselves. We had a global order, which designed by few Western countries some years ago to suit them. That order has really does not represent the rest of the people. It is so tilted toward the very few, and it doesn't give us any voice. Nobody listens to us what we need. People love to tell us. Okay, they have all the wisdom, and they sit there and dish out all this,
the preaching,
and preaching, etc., etc. This doesn't work. Doesn't work. They create the rules, and they don't even respect the rules they all created. And I was looking at some numbers. I mean, you take illicit financial flows out of Africa. illicit financial flow.
Yes.
This is like 100 billion dollars a year. This is UN numbers. The total aid averaging to Africa is 52 billion. Who is funding whom? Who is funding whom? I mean, it's just unacceptable. And we asked our friends in the West, you said, you guys, talk about transparency and why did you put down some rules there about this profit shifting and mispricing, etc.? Can you control your business people? Or because you are beneficial of this opaque system, you are just happy to sit back and smile? I mean, that's unacceptable. We talk about beneficial ownership. Okay.
Yeah.
Anonymous companies. Why you need to have anonymous companies, or where our corrupt people put their money, where drug dealers put their money, where all the bad people, they put it in secretive companies, which nobody, and we've been asking people, please do public registers for this. Oh, yes, that's all right. Yeah, when people dragging their feet. And I was laughing my head off just a few months ago when everybody in Europe was scrambling around. Who owns this mansion? Who owns this super yacht? Is it
Yes.
Putin, or is it one of his? But cannot find because owned by a company which is owned by a company which is you don't know. And I say, excuse me, guys, we have been saying that for years and years.
Yeah.
Why you allow this? These are the hubris, unfortunately, of this world system. Talk about the bond market, and if you are a rich country, you borrow money at 1 or 2%. Okay. The poor, if they can borrow, they borrow at 10%. Now,
Yeah.
I just couldn't understand this. I mean, why the poor have to pay more for the loans they have while the rich pay so little?
Yeah.
And the people tell me, oh, it is the rating agency. But the rating agency actually has this prejudice. They classify people as subgrade, as a investment subgrade, and they end up fulfilling their own prophecies. They drive people to be uninvestable, because if you borrow at 10-11%, there's a good chance you're going to default because it's just too much. You can borrow money from the mafia maybe at a better rate, I don't know. But it is so that creaking system. I mean, I was looking at some numbers by Jeffrey Sachs, he put it the other day, about how Ghana was a much lower debt to GDP, much lower than Greece or Portugal. Those guys were borrowing at 1% or at 0.35%. Ghana was paying 9%. Wow.
Yeah. Talking about Jeff Sachs, he was on my show, a few months ago. It was a very popular episode, by the way, and he made several points, but two of the points stick out now, and I come to think of it. One was, of course, as you were saying, that African representation in global bodies, the agency of Africa is often not highlighted. And so I think Jeff has been saying that Africa should definitely get a seat at the table in many of the forums. That's one thing. And the second thing, Mo, he was saying was that the problem in the world is the lack of goodwill. I don't know what you think about that, because hearing you speak about this really nice historical overview about what has not worked, both in terms of colonial legacy, but also leadership, it actually is clearer to me as to why you started your foundation and why you have the Ibrahim Index of African Governance, right? So, can you tell my listeners, I mean, what do you think has been the impact of some of these measurements? You've created, of course, the prize that rewards leaders, but not every year you found a worthy winner, which is also actually quite noteworthy. But since you started the foundation, since you started measuring governance, how do you see this having evolved? Do you see some progress? I saw the latest, I think it was 2020, you had the last report.
Yeah.
And there were some indicators that governance was progressing slowly.
Yeah.
But so can you give us a little overview of what you see? I mean, since you started the work with the foundation?
Yes, I think to start with, I don't think countries do change quickly.
Yeah.
It's a slow process, really. It is like a big liner to turn around, and you see it takes time. And so we don't have any illusion that there's going to be a silver bullet. We launch this foundation and then everybody will be one. It's not like that. It's going to take a long time. But what we need is to keep pushing, slow progress here. We win more people to the cause. The young generation coming out of Africa is really wonderful. It's different from the old generation. They are more aware of all these issues. And that's important. We see that the African governance changed a lot for the better in the first decade of this century.
Yeah.
And precisely because of collapse of the Berlin end of the Cold War. And many African countries changed the constitution to put term limits, insist on multi-party system. So civil society started to really blossom in Africa. And that was really wonderful. Unfortunately, of the recent years, for a number of reasons, that progress has stalled.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And I think part of it also due to the geopolitical changes around us. Suddenly we saw around us the rise of big men.
Yes.
Authoritarian guys everywhere. And, I don't want to go through all the names, but everywhere we see all these people coming up.
Yeah.
And our African leaders look around and say, hey, I like that, to be like the Chinese leader, to be like the Trump in US, to be like Erdogan in Turkey, to be like Modi in India, to be like, all those guys, Putin. There are a lot of strong men coming up. It became fashionable. And so the fashion caught up. And we saw a lot of reversal of constitutional limits. A number of them happened in Africa, unfortunately. We saw more pressure on civil society. And somebody came up with the idea, we ban civil society from receiving money from abroad.
Yes.
They become agents. I don't know who is the smart guy came with this idea, because that we classify them as foreign agents. I say, excuse me, you go around begging for money from the same guys. And are you an agent yourself or what? Why, when civil society get a little bit of money from this foundation, that foundation, they become, it is really unfortunate.
Yeah.
So that was one of the reasons, I think, for the rise of few strong men around Africa and the rollback of the democratic norms in a number of our countries. And we now see also the phenomena of military coups coming back. We see the number of military actions.
Just look at Burkina Faso, 2 coups in 8 months.
Yeah. It started to come. You look at Sudan, how many coups we have there. We have in Mali, and so different countries started to go through and we hope that this wave of military coups stop. And I found it also very sad that we fund these armies, we create them, and give them arms and give them whatever, and they have all these nice clothes with the medals and stuff like that, and they hold these sticks. I don't know why everyone have a stick in his hand. And instead of going and fighting the terrorists, and they come to the capital and beat young people up. I mean, what is this? What is this? Guys, we from our very little resources, we are giving you all this stuff to go and defend us, not to come and beat our kids,
Right.
that this is one of the really nasty things. Talk about shooting ourselves in the foot. Here we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And
But there have been some exceptional leaders who you have awarded your prize. I'm thinking about President Chissano in Mozambique. I'm thinking about Nelson Mandela, who got an honorary award. I'm thinking about Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. I'm thinking about President Pires from Cape Verde.
Wonderful man. Wonderful
yes.
Man.
So you have a lot of these leaders. And of course, I think in 8 years or 9 years, you haven't found a worthy leader. I wanted to ask you, Mo, I know you have certain criteria. I was looking at the website in terms of getting the Ibrahim Prize. You have to be a former executive head of state or government. You have to have left office in the last 3 years, democratically elected, and served a constitutionally mandated term and demonstrated exceptional leadership. What do you think defines a good leader? What is leadership for you?
I think leadership is to serve. Is really, you have this mentality. You are coming to serve.
A servant leadership, yeah?
Yes, you're coming to serve, to deliver to the people what the people need, and that should be the core of your mission as a leader. I come here, who is hungry, who needs what to need of agriculture, how can I create jobs, what about the young kids, how am I going to train them, how are I going to, we have so many issues, and I don't know how a good leader sleep at night when you have all these issues of you. This mentality that you are servant of the people, you're coming to improve the quality of life for everybody around you. I think that is the main grain which we hope to really to have in our it's this modesty, this humility. I'm a servant, and that's what the unfortunately some of our leaders think, no, I own you. I mean, what is, and it is really unfortunate, and we need to get away also from this curse of natural resources. I mean, it is so sad how we wasting our natural resources. And
do you believe in the resource curse theory, that having resources can actually be a curse, like oil?
Of course, if you had bad leaders, you don't have governance, it will be a curse, because it will deepen. You look at Nigeria, okay?
Yes.
Before they discovered oil, Nigerians had a very good agriculture sector. They're feeding themselves and getting on with life. Then they discover oil. Then, okay, sit back and have rent. Okay? The government is just living on rent, okay? And now, Nigeria cannot feed itself. It's a huge exporter of food. And then this rent money. The problem when you have rent money is that as a leader or as an elite, you don't feel that you owe your people anything. Your salary doesn't come from taxes.
Yeah.
Okay. You think that actually you cut this deal with the oil company, and you're gonna give some to the people, you're gonna keep some, you give some to your friends. It's the rent money. It weakens the link between the ruler and the people, because he doesn't feel obliged. Here in Europe, for example, when we have a problem with the prime minister or somebody, and we say, hey, your wife took a private plane to so and so, this is the taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
Okay, you cannot say that of this country. Not say taxpayer. No, it is a shell, or so it weakened that link and obligation. You feel, I think so, and it is sad when people misuse the result, and it's actually destroy a lot. Corruption becomes so embedded in the regime. How you clean up Nigeria now when you have so many dirty fingers into that oil? I don't know if you see the recent numbers. I mean, if with this boom of and the prices of oil and
Yeah.
all the oil producing companies are laughing all the way to the bank, making a lot of money now, except Nigeria. They're losing money. And say, excuse me, how could you?
Yeah.
That's Nigeria. I mean,
Yeah.
this is sad. This is really sad. How much oil is stolen?
Yeah.
Okay, but people ships are loaded with stolen oil. You cannot keep doing that, and then they subsidize, and most of it then go across the border, stolen and sold for profit. The country is hemorrhaging resources. That these are the self-inflicted wounds I talked about. We cannot just complain about colonialism and coal. Yes, those guys made a lot of mess, but we also creating a lot of mess, and we have to deal with that. But
So some people, of course, say, the problem with Nigeria is, well, natural resources there is perhaps a curse, but the real problem is the lack of economic diversification.
sure, because you getting some money for oil, why you need to worry?
Yeah.
Just don't do anything. I mean, you destroy the agricultural sector, which you had before. You just neglect it. It's much easier. Oil company writes you check every year, it's fine.
Exactly.
That is untrue. But to your earlier point, actually, it is true that some years we don't give a prize.
The price, yeah.
But I think we should not compromise on the criteria we have set what to do it. And it's not very difficult criterion, but it's not easy either. I'm always asked this question in Europe whenever I have journalists or conferences or whatever. Oh, so we don't have any good leaders because you didn't have. And I say, listen, guys, if I offer this prize to a European leader, forget about Africans, whom are the European leaders over the last 10 years? Give me 10 names. I give the prize to. They stop and then they start laughing.
Like me.
You know what? Because leadership is tough. It's difficult.
It is.
It's difficult. And you look around you, who deserved this? And there are not many.
But so, in much of the research on leadership, there's a lot of talk about, most leaders often end up, not just in Africa, but in many parts of the world, they're very sort of transactional. I scratch your back, you scratch mine, etc. And then there are the so-called visionary leaders thinking about, the long term, but they can also be transactional, maybe even undemocratic. But when you look around you, Mo, if you think about not just the African continent, but at large, the whole world, are there any leaders that strike you as somebody who could have got the prize, even though they were not from Africa, or even within Africa? Who impresses you at the moment? Your silence tells me something.
Honestly, it's a difficult question. It's really a difficult question because I think, well, he's not president now, but he may become president. I think Lula was very interesting in Brazil.
Yeah.
Because I managed to have a number of conversations with him a long time ago.
Yeah.
And his idea about social inclusion, ensuring the kids go to school, cash transfer to the families. I think there are some very interesting ideas came up and really tried to do, which was unconventional, but since then become like almost conventional now.
Especially cash transfers, yeah, in Brazil.
Especially, I mean, he has invented that.
Yeah.
And And we're having fun. I mean, one night we were in New York, I mean, even with Stiglitz there and other, and he was laughing. He said, I didn't listen to those guys at all, you know. And he says, it's good that you didn't listen to us. But I think at least some people, some leader I respect for trying to help,
Yeah.
find a way to, because I've been to Brazil, I've seen favelas, and next door was this opulence, amazing, is extreme poverty next to extreme wealth.
Yes.
And it is
That's
just,
inequality for you.
it's too much.
But
And
it's you know, I mean, Lula's legacy was, of course, dented because of allegations of corruption, etc. Now, of course, there's a new election. It'll be exciting to see what happens. Mo, I want to move on to an issue I know you are really interested in, because I've been reading some of your statements, but also a recent report, I think from July of this year, that your foundation published. And this really relates to COP27 that's going to happen in Egypt in November. And before we talk about COP27, I wanted to ask you a very sort of general question, Mo, because I've just returned from a month in Kenya and Ethiopia. And much of the discussion is really about energy security. It is about, you know, and we'll get back to the issue of natural gas, etc. But often there is this feeling, even among leaders, that there's a trade-off between climate and development. And sometimes leaders choose policies that promote development at the expense of climate. It could be a coal-fired power plant, for example, because there's a need for electricity. You want it now, it's cheap, there's technology. Hydropower, you have to wait a long time, nobody's giving you money. So you end up choosing this. But in the end, and this has been something I've been studying in Lamu, you know, in Kenya, where locals said, hey, we don't want this kind of dirty fuel, we want something else, renewable. So the question is, do you think there are trade-offs between climate and development? Is it possible, or do you think no?
You really frame this very well. You frame it very well and very accurately. We need to find the balance between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And given, and that's an important fact, Africa puts out about 3.3% of this stuff out there. Okay,
The carbon footprint is minimal.
we're not, yes, we're not really polluters. And today, the average footprint per African citizen is 1/50th. It's 2% of the footprint of a guy in the developed north.
Yeah.
Okay. So we need to think about the proportionality here, in what we're talking about. What we're doing there does not even move the needle. Okay. And instead of talking about that mass emissions people putting out, people go and tinkering with what Africans doing. Now, second point is people don't take into account also that we have one of the major sinkers of carbon in the world. The second largest sink is the
Congo?
Basin, yes.
Yes.
Estimated about 4%. So actually, Africa as a whole is sinking carbon, is not even emitting carbon. Okay, so these numbers are important to put things in perspective. So we are not contributing at all to what's going on. Now, we have 600 million people without electricity.
Yes.
What are we going to do about that? You don't have electricity, you don't have jobs, you don't have work, you don't have hospitals, you don't have education, you don't have a life. What are we going to do about that? We say, no, we cannot do anything. Of course, we'll do as much solar as we can do. Of course, but we're going to need some gas also as a transition to help that. Why is that controversial? When European Union said gas is a legitimate transition fuel. Why gas is fine for Europe, fine for America, fine for everybody, and is not fine for Africans? When we are not the polluters, we are the sinkers. And the polluters telling us this is utmost of hypocrisy.
So
Utmost of
I've
hypocrisy.
I've heard you say this many times in the recent past. You've said that there is no development without power.
Yeah.
So I can absolutely relate to that. Let me offer you some of the arguments I've heard from European leaders, including my own Minister for Development, International Development. I've posed this question: why is it that there's a blanket ban on fossil fuel financing? Why is it that natural gas as a transition fuel is not seen? And so the argument I often hear is that, oh no, we in our parts of the world, and mind you, this is before the Ukraine war.
I was coming to that.
Yeah, so this is before the Ukraine war. It was this, no, our taxpayers, my voters don't want us to finance fossil fuel projects, and therefore, if it's our aid money, we get to decide. So this is one argument. And of course, I've heard others say, but why are you telling the World Bank not to finance? That is not right. What you do with your own money is fine, but don't tell financial institutions not to finance. But usually that is the argument. Once the war came, of course, and you're right, there's been a Western hypocrisy. When you have Germany, the leader of Germany going to Senegal, signing an agreement on gas. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And
Right now, Africa now seeking gas. At the moment, half the African gas goes to Europe already. At the moment,
yeah,
for Ukraine, half the gas goes to Africa already. So gas is fine for us, but for you, no, it's not fine. And look, when they closed before Ukraine, when Germany closed down or decided not to continue with nuclear and close down some reactors, they built 3 major coal-fired power stations.
Yeah.
Did anybody say anything? Those wonderful bankers and the multilateral system say, oh, because they don't need to finance them, they go and do it.
Yeah.
Everybody's building this stuff and doing it. Who funded Nord Stream 2? Who's funding that? Come on. The British Prime Minister here in UK this morning was talking about, okay, now we're gonna invest in new gas fields in Britain. We're gonna allow fracking in Britain. So for them, yeah, we'll do it.
Yep.
They don't need the World Bank to finance them, or they do it. But then they go to the World Bank and vote to stop the bank financing us to do small part of what you do.
Yep.
Given that we are emitting a fraction of listen, if we're going to have really any discussion about fossil and carbon, the facts are facts. North America, they put up 16 tons per year per person. Yeah, Europe books up 6. China puts up 6 or 7. India books up 2. These guys, okay, right. Let us agree. Your colleague from India, Professor Rajan, made a very good proposal the other day, which he published in the op-ed in Financial Times. I don't think nobody listened to it. He said a very simple way to do it. Why don't we agree? This is a public good. What is the number per person? 3 tons? What is the number which will not upset, the climate? Is it 3 tons? It's okay. The guys who do more, they pay into a fund. Here is the price per ton.
Mo, I've heard another argument I want to hear your views on.
This money
Yeah.
goes to the guys who are doing less. So you have incentive for the guys doing more not to do, and for guys who are doing less to keep doing less.
Yeah.
Because they receive money. That is a sensible way.
So another counter argument I've heard, especially on the gas issue, is that look at oil. It did not help many of these countries escape poverty. Why do you think natural gas is going to solve the electricity problem? How will you know that the revenues will actually trickle down, etc.? What do you think of that argument?
This is the defeatist one. It assumes that Africa is consigned to corruption and misrule. And this is, if that's the situation, we better all go home. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just switch off the lights. It's no point.
So in terms of renewables, again, going back to this report that your foundation published earlier this year, there is, of course, I see, say in Kenya, I think Kenya and Ethiopia, there's a lot of focus on the geothermal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but then there is also, you know, solar investments, I think, is considerable. So it's not like African leaders have not invested. But one of the things I noticed in that report is that although Africa accounts for 40% of the world's total solar potential, it only hosts 1% of the world's panels. So obviously, right?
We have green economy is a great opportunity for us. And we need to look at green as a wonderful thing to embrace. It's not that when we talk about gas or this is a supplementary something for immediate use, but green technology. Do you know, for example, 22 African countries, 22 out of 54 have renewable as their main source of energy.
Yeah.
No other continent in the world have that. So we are not polluters, and we're not sitting back. We're trying our best. Hydro, solar, geothermal, whatever it is, and so we try to do our best, but we're gonna need a transition also, and in some situation we're gonna need gas also, because battery technology is developing, and
storage is going to be crucial, right? Yeah, storage is going to be a big issue, I think, going forward.
That's why we're going to need something to sustain us until we can manage this situation.
So it's naive. It's naive to think that Africa can develop without hydrocarbons.
No,
any.
No way. No way. We cannot. It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Okay. We do our best, and the final arguments, we are net sinkers. So what those guys want from us? What more? We are drinking their carbon. What more do you want?
So now that we are heading towards COP27, what do you think will happen? A lot of people are saying this is Africa's COP. Now it's time for African leaders, negotiators to really, influence the process. There's been a lot of criticism that African leaders, they often write op-eds, but these are not heard enough at COP. Are you optimistic about COP in Egypt?
I have to be optimistic, Dan. This stuff.
What do you think will happen, Mo?
Without being optimistic, I hope there have been a lot of discussions about all these issues over this year. And I think people started to understand a little bit the African point of view. The problem, we don't have a voice.
Yeah.
We don't have a seat at the table. G7, G20, G20, all these numbers. Where is the African Union? We're not there. They did not listen to us. So some people, we start to make enough noise, and I hope we continue to do it. I really hope, one important issue here, we have the 10 most vulnerable countries for climate change are all African.
Yes.
We have a low level of resilience, and this creating a major problem for us. It's damaging infrastructure, it damages community, it creates conflicts. We have herders moving because of desertification, encroaching on farmlands. Then you end up with conflicts between farmer and herders everywhere, from Darfur in Sudan to Kano and in Nigeria, everywhere in Africa this is happening, and that creating serious problems for us. It's estimated that within the next between now and 2030, we're going to be an additional 40 million people who have to migrate because of climate.
Yes.
Where are they going to go? Okay, of course, most of them will stay for Africa. Europe makes a lot of noise about boat people, but that's tricky. Most of this place people are split within Africa, actually. And that again create other problems and other conflicts.
Yeah.
Okay. And of course, there will be more people trying to cross the Mediterranean or whatever. How are we going to deal with that? How are we going to deal with that? And the rich country said, okay, we're going to create a fund, $100 billion a year to help really mitigation and adaptation or whatever. Then the money didn't materialize. So people talk. And you see, this goes back to the issue of carbon pricing. As long as those guys say, oh, we're going to create a fund to help those poor guys, you know, whatever, in their mind, it's a charity.
Yeah.
This is not a charity. But if we price carbon, then people know they are paying for their emission, for their consumption. It's not a charity. And that's why we need to move to carbon. You have been taught in the West, I guess. I have been taught also in the West. And those guys preach to me about the power of the market. The market. We have to respect that, the market.
Yes.
When it comes to carbon, where is the market? Where is the market? This is the problem, is that people, the lack of consistency. People need to be consistent. It's not pick and choose.
So
And
in going to COP then, Mo, do you think, I'm thinking that two issues that are going to be controversial. One is natural gas.
yeah,
Right? All these countries on the continent, on the African continent, that have the potential, and it's good for cooking, it is less polluting, but also as a transition fuel. So that is one issue. And the second, as you just mentioned, the loss and damage aspect,
yes,
right? The reparations.
yeah.
If you, and I'll try and air this episode close to COP, so let's see if your predictions are true.
Right. But you see, the first issue actually, I think is gonna win. Now, our friends in Europe love gas.
Yeah.
And they're already running around trying to invest, find a way to secure gas, etc. I think it's gonna win, most likely. People understand now.
Yeah. So the Ukraine war is going to create more support for natural gas on the African continent?
I think so.
Okay.
I think people understand that, oh, it is, of course, they're going to say, oh, because Russia now was authoritarian regime, we're going to need gas. I mean, I understand that. And
Yeah.
that is a good transition. So it's much better than burning coal or burning more pollutant things. But at the same time, we going very fast building renewables. I mean, the largest solar farm in the world is in Morocco. Yeah, we're doing all sorts of things. We can hydrogen. Namibia building facility for 300,000 tons a year of green hydrogen. We're doing our bit, so it's fine. And the issue of creating that fund is a problem. And unless people accept the role of the market here, I don't see you moving anywhere. If we are serious about climate, we have to price carbon. That's what only moves the needle. That's only the way people behave. But why our leaders in the West refusing to do that? I just don't understand.
Do you think there's more willingness to finance loss and damage to provide more money?
I'm not sure. This people refuse to acknowledge the responsibilities or act on them. And you see my point, that even if we forget about loss and I'm not saying we forget about that, even if we forget about that, let's start from your friend Rajan here proposal. I don't know if you are friends or not, I said but because you both work in the same field. But that's a wonderful proposal. Pay for what you're doing now. That's what changed. That's what will change really the whole situation around us. If you okay, you want to use it, pay for it. But as long as you say, oh, I will not get be elected as a leader if I increase the price of petrol or gas, or if I do this. People want to be elected, they only short term, so they try to wriggle from this kind of commitment. Look, then we are going nowhere.
Mo, one final question. I've kept you too long. One final question. I read somewhere that you have signed up, you've joined the Giving Pledge, the campaign to encourage wealthy people like yourselves, because you've been a successful entrepreneur, but you are also contributing to philanthropic causes. Now, you know that some philanthropists like the Gates Foundation, like Bill Gates, they've been controversial, not least in the United States during the pandemic, etc. People wonder what is their real agenda, etc. How do you see philanthropy contributing to global development in the years to come?
I think philanthropists are, I don't consider myself philanthropist, to be honest. It's true, I give my money, well, vast majority of my money actually, it's not half, I gave towards the foundation. But I think we are part of civil society in our foundation, fighting for justice, for better governance, etc. We're not giving away blankets or giving away baby powder, or we're not even a granting foundation, because also we don't accept grants, because taking money creates perceptions also.
And dependency, I suppose.
Yeah, we need to be credible, and we don't want any. So we don't take money from any government or anybody or any stuff. This money I made in Africa, and everyone know I made it cleanly.
Yeah.
Just give it to the foundations. Nobody has African money. Nobody can say you are agents of anybody. But as for from the France base, I attended some of the meetings of our friends in the Global Fridge, etc. In general, they are well-meaning people. Well-meaning people trying to help. And many of them are genuinely helping. Some, of course, want the limelight. It goes with.
Sure.
Yes. It looks nice, And of course, some people like that, etc. But I think anybody willing to do anything, anybody is not just giving pledge. Anybody willing to say, "Here, I give $1 for somebody who needs it," is wonderful. Anybody, because we are, as a human race, we need to really support each other. So I always say thank you. I'm not sure that all what you're doing is the best that can be done, or the best way to spend money, but we say thank you. So for Bill Gates, I always say thank you, Bill. You come from far away to dish out some medicines in Africa. Is wonderful. Thank you very much. So that would, I think we need to just say thank you.
Well, it is my turn to thank you for this wonderful chat. It was such a pleasure to see you. And again, thank you for coming on my program.
Thank you very much, Dan, and we look forward to meet in person. And I promise we'll come to Oslo and we'll have a good conversation with the people there.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please spread the news among friends and colleagues and share the link to the podcast on social media. You can tag us on Twitter at GlobalDevPod and Dan Banik.
Thank you for listening to In Pursuit of Development with Professor Dan Banik from the University of Oslo's Center for Development and the Environment. Please email your questions, comments, and suggestions to inpursuitofdevelopment@gmail.com.